r/ask Reddit. What is the dumbest solution to a problem that actually worked? One of my friends is a teacher and he was finding it hard to deal with his kids dabbing in class. So he started doing it in a super white dude awkwardly trying to fit in with no rhythm way. The kids stopped. Who knew that the way to get kids to stop doing drugs is to have the nerdy teachers do drugs? Started using the word low-key after every other word, which annoyed the hell out of my students. 2 days and everyone stopped using it, at least in my classes. A tick crawled into the headphone jack of my phone. The next 2 searches on my phone were, what eats ticks? Guinea hen mating noises. After about 15 seconds of female guinea hen sounds, the tick crawled out of my phone. Genius. My car got pummeled in a terrible hailstorm. Little dents over every surface of the car. My insurance would only write it off as a total loss, and I didn't want to give the car up. A friend pointed out that since I live in the desert, the heat will likely fix a lot of those dents over time. That's exactly what happened. A year later, you had to look carefully to find dents where there used to be 100 of them. Ignoring the problem fixed it. Shoulder let them write it off as a total loss and then bought it back from them as a salvage title for $500. You'd never be able to sell it again, but you'd already have the money and it sounds like you wanted to keep it. My insurance company offered me 2 deals. Total loss, forfeit car, and total loss, keep car. I thought that was standard. Looks like you chose the life isn't fair plan. Drove to a neighboring town 80 miles away with one burned out headlight. Remaining headlight went out while in said town. I had no money, and shops were closed regardless. These were dual beam, so although I had lost both headlights, the high beams worked. I didn't make it out of town with getting honked at and flashed repeatedly by angry passing motorists, and understandably so. What was I to do? I continued down the highway and made it about 15 miles before I'm pulled over by the first officer to see me. I explained the situation. Officer has no suggestions. This was before cell phones. Tells me I can go but that I won't make it home without getting stopped again. I pull over at the next exit, get a free water, dump it in the dirt, make a thin mud, and smeared it over my lights. Worked like a charm. No more honks or flashes. Passed multiple officers. My dad had a similar issue once. A light on the back of his boat trailer went out, so he just duct tapped a flashlight in a red solo cup to the back. I couldn't connect to the Wi-Fi. My Wi-Fi adapter wasn't working right and wouldn't connect to anything. So I right-clicked on the adapter in the control panel. Click diagnose and Windows fixed it automatically. Only time I have seen it work. Hold on to this experience for the rest of your life. It may never happen again. Windows 10, they changed the way it fixes things and will now do everything it needs to do to fix it, up to the point of completely reinstalling Windows. It's been a godsend to just tell my mother to make Windows solve all her problems. Nurses here will recognize this one. Once I was dealing with an extremely agitated and fearful Alzheimer's patient who had been sundowning since 3 p.m. Sundowning is an occurrence in some Alzheimer's patients where their mental function gets worse and worse as the day goes on once it starts to get dark. In a hoe, this sweet old lady was having an absolute fit. All through my shift, night shift yay, I was running in and out of her room. The bed alarm kept going off. She was so confused, afraid. I desperately wanted her to go to sleep. Mind you, I had 7 other patients. I finally walk her out to the nurse's station and plop her down in a seat next to me while I do my charting. She is yelling at me and throwing things. I've had it at this point and I'm running out of ideas. I finally look at her and say, how will I ever finish with a wash? My husband will be so mad when he gets home. Would you help me finish? She looks me right in the eye, clear as day, and says, damn it sister, don't you ever learn? Give me that laundry. Haha. So I grab a stack of folded towels and mess them up real quick and plop them in front of her. She folded all of them. I would say, oh look at that. She turned around and I would mess the towels up again. This went on a few times until this sweet lady just passed out, exhausted from being so worked up earlier, and maybe from all the towel folding. I slowly push her in the desk chair down the hall and gently get her back into bed. She started to wake up and I leaned down and whispered, all the wash is done. You have nothing else to worry about. She slept throughout the night. We were both happy. I am the grandma whisperer. Back in the day, hitting a TV or other appliance to make it work. Hell, even today it still works sometimes. Percussive maintenance. I used to work for DirecTV and I got a phone call from Henry Winkler's house. It was a really easy fix. I just had to resend authorizations on my end for a service expired message because he rarely used this guest room. But I was able to talk him into hitting it, and then I resent authorizations and it came back on and he was like AI. I told him what I did, but he thought it was funny. Our family cat hated our family dog, rubbed the dog all over with fresh catnip, new best friends. And here I am now, wondering if I could befriend a lion doing this. Something similar. We had a problem with my dog just trashing all of her toys as soon as she got them. So we put a stuffed rabbit, or something, in a bin with our dirty laundry. She loved that rabbit because it smelled like us. Never destroyed it, just carried it around. My sister was hospitalized at 4 years old for a buildup of fluid in her head. She refused to drink any of the milk being offered by the hospital because it didn't have the cow and sunglasses on the side of the box that the other hospital's milk had. Her being a sick child in for literal brain surgery, the hospital went above and beyond sending someone to the local grocery store to try and find this milk brand with the cow wearing sunglasses. When they never found it, I googled the image, asked if they had a printer, and taped the cow to the side of their milk carton. I still think it's adorable that worked. When I was a social worker, I had a developmentally disabled client who was obsessed with light bulbs. It was to the point where we had to plan to go to the store weekly to buy him a new bulb to install in one of his lamps. If we didn't get him his fix, he'd start breaking bulbs to force the issue. So I took him one week and bought him a cheap, generic bulb. The image on the carton was just a plain outline of a light bulb. But my client started freaking out that the bulb was wrong because there were words printed on the top of the bulb itself, unlike the picture, wattage, etc. He started escalating really quickly, swearing and threatening and generally leading down a path to having to call the police. I was at the end of my rope trying to explain the discrepancy, grabbed a pen, and drew in the words on the carton's label. It was like an off switch for his anger, and the rest of the day was a blast. Sometimes people's expectations are simultaneously way more important and vastly easier to meet than we believe. I hope your sister's hospitalization went well and she enjoyed her milk. When applying for college they never sent me my student ID with my student number and everything I needed. I call in and they made a big deal about having to fill out forms and get approval from someone and all sorts of bullshit. So I just walked into the front desk and said I lost it. They printed a new ID and gave me my number right then on the spot. Bought a not chargeable iPhone 5S from a second-hand store for bargain. Used a toothpick to clean the contact. Phone is chargeable now and works perfectly. Similarly, my friend was gonna throw away his old iPod mini because it didn't work anymore and he had a new one. So I asked for it and he gave it to me. Swapped out the charging cable for another cable and it worked. The only broken thing was the original charger. I offered it back to him since it was never really broken, but he was kind and let me keep it since he already had a new one. There was a nursing home in Germany and the patients with dementia kept wandering off. They installed a fake bus stop in front of the nursing home so when dementia and patients got out of the building, they would go sit at the fake bus stop and wait for the non-existent bus. The bus stop was clearly visible from the main offices, so whenever staff saw someone out there, they would just go and retrieve them. Solved the problem completely. Restarting a computer does so much. And phones. My sister had an issue with her phone overheating. Turns out she had never closed an app ever and never turned the thing off. She used it all night for a sleep tracking app and all day because she was a teenager. I force closed all the apps and restarted it. It was like new. Smartphones are incredibly tough when you consider the amount of use we get out of them. Dudes pissing absolutely everywhere in the bathroom where I once worked. So the janitor put a little red sticker in each toilet and suddenly the problem stopped. Apparently men will aim at a target 100% of the time, if a target is presented. That's why a lot of urinal brands have their logo in them. Guys will aim at the target, though. On the subject of urinals and ideas, who thought these waterless urinals were a good idea? They're great for about a year, but then they get clogged up with piss and calcium, and the whole bathroom smells like stale urine. Several months ago I was working in an ICU when a pipe burst in the ceiling and began to leak into my patient's room. The supervisor's solution was move him into the hall. However, that would have killed this particular patient. Thankfully, it had been a rainy weekend, so I propped my umbrella up on the patient and the water ran off harmlessly into the floor. The surgeon had a tiny heart attack when he saw it a bit later, but he got over it, I suppose. My house is about 100 years old with a basement, and the basement windows are just as old. A basement window kept popping open, and they opened to the inside. I noticed there were a few leftover 20 feet pieces of wood trim never used, so I placed one end on the bottom part of the window frame, bent the trim so it bows, and stuck the other end in the corner of the wall opposite. It holds true and fits like a glove. That was 4 years ago, and I promised myself I'm going to fix it properly tomorrow. Sounds like you fixed it properly 4 years ago. If it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid. Tapping on the guidance computer during the Apollo 11 moon landing. Ignoring it and hoping it goes away. Worked with those creepy murder clowns last year. My first vehicle was a 1985 Dodge Ram that had around 300k miles on it. Needless to say, it wasn't exactly reliable. Anyway, my friend and I had tickets to go see a concert in a city that was about 3 hours away. We made it there just fine and had a blast at the concert. We couldn't afford to stay overnight, so we started on the long journey home. If all went well, we would get home around 3 AM. There was one stretch of highway where there was 60-ish miles between towns. It's pretty much the worst place to break down on that journey. There were big signs warning travelers to fill up with gas before leaving town. But I had half a tank. My truck sputtered out and died almost halfway between the two towns. It sure sounded like I ran out of gas, but the gauge still showed half a tank. All had not gone well. So there we were, 1:45 AM, stuck on the side of the highway in Texas. 30 miles from the nearest towns, no moonlight, and this was before teenagers had cell phones. We were screwed. After a bit of poking around with a flashlight, we discovered that we did have fuel, but the fuel pump had died. We decided to sleep in the truck and mess with it in the morning. On those old Dodge trucks, the fuel pump was inside the engine instead of in the fuel tank like a modern vehicle. It was powered by the engine instead of an electric motor. Essentially, the fuel pump would constantly pump gasoline when the engine was running, and gas would always be available for the carburetor float valve. The extra pumped gas would just go back into the gas tank. I was just drifting off to sleep when I got an idea. I worked for almost an hour in the pitch dark. I used some extra hose from an agricultural fertilizer, a drink straw, screw clamps, and duct tape to rig the windshield fluid pump to pump fuel from the fuel line into the carburetor float line. I got in my truck, hit the windshield fluid lever, and the truck started right up. It took a bit of trial and error, but I was able to get the timing down where I knew how often to hit the lever to keep the truck running. We made it back home just after 4:30 AM. My dad wasn't immediately amused with my handiwork, but he told all of his friends how clever his son was, so I guess it passed the dad test. Dumbus program director of our hospital decided for patient safety there should be no abbreviations in patients' charts and record. That goes for TURBT, LAVH, surgical jargons that doesn't make sense to lay people. Which kind of makes sense, I guess. Then he went overboard and started to ask everyone to write out full names for cancer markers and lab data and their units. It worked. He was let go. In the UK, people are legally entitled to be able to view their own medical records if they request it. This panicked quite a few medical professionals. If you ever see older medical records from just before this time, you'll see stuff like TTFO, which stands for told to go away, MFC, measure for coffin, and NFC, normal for Cornwall, can be adapted to the location. I just like the rhyme. Most of it is pretty specific to the area and tends to be little in jokes among the local health professionals. In my own place of work, I once saw a light bulb drawn in the corner of the page. When I asked what it meant, I was told this particular health professional used that to warn his colleagues the person was a bit dim. I played WoW back in college. A new expansion came out, and I was supposed to receive my copy via overnight shipping on release day. I checked the tracking number and it said it was delivered. So I went to check my mailbox. Nothing there other than some junk mail. Talked to the lady at the mailroom, and she says she sorted all the packages for the day. So if it wasn't in my box it didn't come and I should call UPS. Call UPS, and they insist that if the tracking number says it was delivered, it was delivered. After several minutes of arguing, they tell me to check with the mailroom again. So I did. The lady goes to the loading dock to check. I'm not convinced she actually did, and comes back several minutes later empty-handed. Now I care less about the game and more about what is apparently a lost package. So I'm venting to my roommate about it. He asks me for the number at UPS, and gives them a call. I overhear half of a sob story about how he needs this textbook to study for a test. He ordered it overnight shipped. The tracking says it's delivered but the mailroom can't find it. Now he's going to fail. On and on. UPS actually called the driver, who was apparently new, and he says no one was around to sign for the overnight packages, so he left them off to the side at the loading dock. Back at the mailroom, the lady is obviously annoyed to see me again. We tell her what UPS said, and she says she'll look again tomorrow since they're about to close for the day. I double down on the textbook story, and she goes to look, probably for real this time. Lo and behold, she returns with my box and a couple others of the same shape and size, probably fellow WoW enthusiasts. Apparently the driver left them in completely the wrong place, which is why she never found them. I spent the remainder of the evening and much of the early morning hours studying with my new book. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.